Rain poured over the quiet town of Elkhorn Valley like a slow, steady drumbeat. The sky had turned a deep steel gray, and the wind curled through the trees like a whisper no one wanted to hear. At the edge of town, a small coffee shack stood, warm inside but hollow that night. Two men sat at the counter, Joe and Marty, both locals, both usually quick with a joke or story. But this evening, their faces were drawn and tired. Their coffee sat untouched. The usual rhythm of laughter and chatter had vanished, replaced by silence and long, worried stares at the storm outside. Elkhorn Valley had always been a tight-knit town. When something needed doing, people came together. That's exactly what they had done to build a small clinic. For years, they saved every spare dollar, ran charity drives, and even gave up comforts to see it through. Finally, they had the building, walls, roof, plumbing, but no beds, no equipment. The money had run out right before the finish line. The realization had sunk in that week, and it hit hard. After all that effort, the place still couldn't serve a single patient. Joe and Marty weren't just worried, they were heartbroken. Later that evening, the school headmaster, Caleb Wright, learned about the situation. He was close to retirement, respected by all, and known for being calm in a crisis. When he heard the news, he quietly made a decision. Years ago, he had inherited a piece of land in Clearwater, a small place outside town. It had been in his family for generations, but he hadn't used it for anything in years. If he sold it now, he might just raise enough money to buy the missing hospital beds. The next morning, with dark clouds still rolling in, Caleb, Joe, and Marty boarded the train to Clearwater. The rain hadn't let up. Water streaked down the windows and flooded the tracks. Trees along the route bent with the wind, and the world looked grayer by the mile. When they arrived, the town was half hidden in fog and silence. The train station was empty. The streets were flooded and quiet. No taxis, no people, just the sound of water and wind. They had planned to walk to the river, cross it by boat, and reach the land Caleb wanted to sell. As they made their way through the muddy roads, headlights cut through the fog. An old van approached, driven by an older man who somehow looked familiar. Without a word, he pulled over and motioned for them to get in. Grateful, they accepted the ride. The van creaked along through forested paths and open fields, heading toward the river. The driver stayed quiet, offering only the occasional glance through the rearview mirror. Something about him felt a little off, not threatening, but not quite grounded either, like he belonged to a different time. When they reached the riverbank, the current was rough and high. No ferrymen in sight. The boats rocked against their ropes. It was late, and no one was working the docks in that weather. They were stuck. Just then, the driver pointed to a house not far from the river's edge. It was small, old, and weathered by years of storms. He motioned again, for them to stay there for the night. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood and dust. The floorboards were soft with moisture. It looked like no one had lived there in years. A broken window let in the wind, and rain had found its way into corners of the room, but it was shelter. They accepted it. The driver left, saying he'd sleep in the van. The three men laid out mats on the floor and tried to rest. But deep into the night, Caleb woke. Something had stirred him. A faint sound, soft at first, then sharper. It was coming from outside, digging. He crept to the window and peered out. Under the old oak tree in the backyard, the van driver was on his knees, hands in the soil, digging with slow, deliberate movements. The sight struck Caleb with a chill. He woke Joe and Marty, and they stepped outside to investigate. The soil beneath the tree was freshly turned. Something metal glinted beneath the surface. They dug carefully, brushing aside wet earth. Inside a rusted container, they found stacks of cash, old but dry and intact. Enough money to fund the entire clinic. The discovery was overwhelming. None of them spoke. The air felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. Then the wind shifted. The branches above them creaked loudly, and when they looked up, a figure sat in the tree, tall, pale, hollow-eyed. It was the driver, but not the man they'd seen hours earlier. This figure glowed faintly. His limbs seemed too long, his presence too still. He didn't speak, but his message came through with clarity. He had died a year earlier in an accident not far from that very spot. His savings had been buried beneath that tree. Never claimed, never spent. He had remained in the world, restless, waiting for someone who still cared. He had watched Caleb, heard about the town's clinic, seen the decision to sell a piece of history for the good of others. That had been enough. Now, his purpose was done. He vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, fading into the mist. The men stood in silence, clutching the container of bills, their minds racing to keep up with what they had just seen. The night had been long, wet, and strange, but something sacred had happened under that tree. The next morning, they returned to Elkhorn Valley with the funds. No one else ever knew where the money came from. The beds were bought, the equipment installed, and the clinic opened within weeks. It served its first patient the very next month. The town never knew about the ghostly guide who had helped them from beyond the grave. But Caleb, Joe, and Marty remembered. Every time it rained and the wind howled down the valley, they remembered the house by the river, the man in the tree, the buried kindness, and they never doubted again that even in the darkest night, sometimes the light finds a way back.